So some of the problems in the midst of the growing richness of data and information, you're struggling to get internal alphanumeric data under control. We're talking about grabbing large amounts of data from images and even tweets and YouTube videos, images if we're talking in healthcare. It's a large amount of data, but we still have problems getting our regular data, financial spreadsheets. I saw on one of the posts something about AIG where you're still having problems, or they were having problems a couple of years ago, just aggregating data from the different departments because of the disparate systems that were there. The installation of company-wide software packages such as SAP has brought forth the problems of dirty data. When you go to implement one of these databases, you realize what the problems are within your organization. Data from different databases, they may have different names, not just for the individual customers. So you may have a Tom Jones in one database and you may have Thomas Jones in another database. Are they the same person? And what rules would you use to determine that they are the same person? And that's a problem. If you have a customer database in one and you have customer X or whatever database here, are we talking the same thing? You have to look at the fields. Well, just because they're named the same doesn't mean they actually have the same set of data. There may be some differences between them. They also use different time frames. So, for example, one database may be for the last 7 years, another database may be for the last 3 years. Which one has the current set of data? And this gets to the notion of what's called a system of record. At some point, when going through these problems, these projects, it is to be clearly identified which system is the system of record for the data. Once that is identified, it technically becomes trivial because you say if there is a problem, the rule says we use system X and that's it, and there's no debate about it. And does that lead to problems? Of course it does, but it still at least gets you moving a lot faster. Attempts to get this under control, this has been a problem in IS for a very long time. The minute we had multiple databases, we had many, many problems. And a lot of it arose because the needs started to grow very rapidly. And as the needs grow, people adapt, and IT adapts to try and meet those needs without necessarily thinking of long-term implications or even knowing what those implications are. So that's where you run into that problem. So another problem is inconsistent definitions from application to application, department to department, and so forth. What does a piece of data mean? In the healthcare field, I've seen in health insurance, what does a paid claim mean? Does a paid claim mean that a claim was adjudicated properly? Or does a paid claim mean that we actually paid a value? Because you can adjudicate a claim with a zero payment. But does that constitute a paid claim? Or does a paid claim mean we have to pay at least 1 penny? Now that may seem trivial, but these are types of discussions that go on in insurance companies because the finance department may have one view of it and the operations department may have another view of it. What constitutes a customer? In a retail organization, a customer may be someone who's entered the store or someone who's visited online or someone who's actually given us their information online. To the finance department, a customer may only be the person who's actually paid us something, where we actually received revenue. Those inconsistent definitions cause many, many problems because if you're trying to get a report of how many customers did we get last month, now you have to choose which definition you're going to use. And building data warehouses, one of the first fundamental things is to clearly identify these definitions. So the role of data administration is a little bit different than database administration. Database administrators are really what we call the DBAs. These are the people who take care of the database. They make sure the box is running. They make sure that the software is up to date. They make sure that the tables are created appropriately. They make sure that it's running fine. The data administrator is a little bit different, and sometimes they're called data stewards because these are the people who determine what data should be used and where should it be used. And when data moves from organizational boundaries, both internal and external, they're the people that have to determine what format are we going to use. And so these data stewards have a very, very key role in maintaining a data dictionary and maintaining those definitions. It does not mean that the data stewards make the definitions. What it means is that they work with the business users to ensure that the data definitions are consistent and agreed upon. If you have a data steward who basically makes up the definitions and says, this is it, that's a big problem because the departments are never going to realize or recognize his authority or her authority. The data steward has to get consensus on data definitions, and ultimately, if there's a decision that needs to be made, it's usually made at a C-level If the CFO and the COO have a problem, it's usually going to be the CEO who says, this is what I want the data to read, if they can't come to an agreement. So that kind of concludes the first part to managing data. We'll see you for the second part.